In this video, I will be evaluating my foundation portfolio thriller opening. This includes taking a close look at the assessment criteria and what it requires. I will also be looking at what we did well and what went wrong in terms of the criteria that needed to be met. The first part of the criteria is having shooting material appropriate for the task set. When looking back at my thriller opening in reference to the shooting material that we used, we didn't have any filler material in our opening, as all the material shot was essential in relation to developing the plot. However, when it came to shooting specific scenes, we realised that the vision of what we wanted the scene to look like wasn't realistic, which resulted in us having to tweak and change certain elements of the scene so that it was easier to film, such as the area that we shot in the woods, and when we needed the female character to fall down to the floor. We couldn't make it look realistic and believable, so we edited it out and put a sound effect in instead. The second part of the assessment criteria is having controlled use of the camera. I think that we met this requirement very well, as we used various methods of controlling the camera when appropriate. For example, we used a tripod in scenes which included dialogue and reaction shots, whereas in scenes which included running and tracking the character, we used a handheld camera, as this use of the camera helped build up the tension in the scene. However, an issue that we had when controlling the camera was that when we were trying to create the high angle tilt and zoom shot that appears in our thriller opening, we struggled to position the camera at an angle that we wanted. So we ended up holding the tripod up with the camera on top to get the shot that we wanted. The third section requires attention to framing. Our overall use of framing was thoroughly thought out and was used in a variety of ways. For instance, we used restricted narration to create the sense of enigma and panic. We also made sure that the composition of each shot was set out in a way that would engage the audience. Although one of the things that could have been improved on is the use of restrictive framing. If we had used a restrictive framing shot in the kitchen scene, one of the pre-production props wouldn't be visible and would therefore make the scene more believable. The fourth section of the assessment criteria is to use a variety of shot sizes. We tried to use shot sizes that were suitable in relation to the action playing out in a particular scene. For example, in scenes that position the viewers to focus on the character's facial expression, we used close-ups as this focused on their emotions and expressions. Whereas in the scenes where a large amount of body language is being expressed, we used medium shots. One thing that I think we could improve on is if we used a wider variety of shot sizes. This would therefore help emphasise the action taking place in the scene a bit more. The fifth section focuses on paying close attention to the mise-en-scène. A lot of pre-production planning took place to try and fulfill all the required elements of the mise-en-scène for our opening. For example, we used two very contrasting locations. The costumes were chosen to suit each character and the instances that occurred to them. Specific props were used to make it more believable, and the overall use of colour and lighting was to help enhance the storyline and the fact that the film is a thriller. The sixth section requires editing so that meaning is apparent to the viewer. We used various editing aspects to try and create meaning to the viewer, such as using specific filters to try and intensify the feeling of the character having a flashback. Also by presenting the flashbacks as a montage whilst the camera focuses on one specific character. Section 7 requires making selective and appropriate use of short transitions, captions and other effects. Other post-production effects that we used were transitions such as fade and dissolve, and this helped connect one shot to another. The method of titling used was in this context ironic, as the layout and design of the title was to imitate a wedding invitation, which would connote the feeling of love, which is clearly the opposite of the feelings that the couple in our opening feel for one another. One way I think we could improve in terms of this section is if we produced a scroll or ticker with the actors and people's names who were involved in making the product. This would have made the thriller appear a bit more professional. The final section of the assessment criteria is recording and editing sound with images appropriately. When editing the sound and images together, we use a lot of parallel sound to accompany the action taking place, like the running scenes in the woods, which were accompanied by high crescendo fast-paced music. We also used Foleys when appropriate to emphasise the gestures taking place, such as the water running from the tap. One of the things that didn't go very well was when we were trying to find a suitable Foley sound effect In the end, we had to settle for a sound that was close enough to the kind of sound we wanted viewers to hear. Overall, I personally think that we did very well in the editing process, as we created a professional montage of flashbacks. Our use of costumes and props were also very convincing, as we tried our best to use realistic costumes and props that were relatable towards the storyline. Alternatively, I think our main weaknesses were to do with time management, as we thought it was realistic to film everything within a day, when in reality this wasn't the case.